I had signed it on a Wednesday, sitting at the kitchen table in the apartment on Callaway Street in Garden City, using a pen I'd borrowed from the property manager and forgotten to give back. The apartment was a one-bedroom on the second floor, east-facing, with a window in the main room that caught the afternoon light at an angle I found agreeable. The property manager had shown me 3 units. I chose the smallest one because it had the best light and because the monthly number fit inside a budget I had been building toward for 5 years. There were a few minutes after the signing where I just sat at the table with the paperwork in front of me and the pen still in my hand. The room was quiet in the particular way unfurnished rooms are quiet, not empty exactly, just waiting. I set the pen on the table. I sat there another minute. Then I folded my copy of the lease and put it in my bag, returned the pen to the property manager's office, and drove home. I was 27 years old. I worked as a financial analyst at a regional firm with a branch office on Denton Boulevard. I had saved $23,714 over the course of my working life, set aside in 3 separate accounts, contributed to steadily and without exception. The lease was signed. The move date was set for 2 weeks out. The dinner invitation from my father arrived the same evening, sent as a text message at 9:11 p.m., family dinner Sunday. Important we all sit down before the big move. Be here at 6:30. I read it once. I set my phone on the counter next to the signed lease. I looked at both of them for a moment, the lease with the property manager's initials at the bottom, my own signature above it, and the phone screen already going dark. There was a folder on the phone I had organized the week before, which I'd closed without looking at again after the calls were done. I left the phone face down and went to bed. I texted back that I would be there. My name is Celeste Pruitt. I am 27 years old and I have worked in financial analysis since I was 22, first as an assistant at a larger firm in Dearborn, then at the branch on Denton Boulevard, where I had been for 3 years and where I was, by that Sunday evening, the second most senior analyst on the team. I understood numbers the way some people understand weather, not by predicting them exactly, but by reading the conditions that produced them. My father, Randall Pruitt, had never held a consistent relationship with money. Not in the way I mean that as a criticism. He worked, he provided the basics, there was always food and the utilities stayed on. What he lacked was the capacity to see money as something that belonged to the person who earned it. He saw it more as a family resource, a pool that should be managed collectively, and he had appointed himself without discussion as the collective manager. This wasn't a position he'd announced or defended. It was simply the operating assumption he'd built his household around, the same way some people build a household around a particular meal schedule or a particular version of a family's history. It was structural. It wasn't personal except when it was. My brother Devin was 30 and still lived at home. This was not, in my father's telling, a situation to be resolved, it was a domestic arrangement that suited everyone. Devin helped with the house, Randall provided stability, and the money moved in whatever direction Randall decided was most practical. Devin nodded along to most of what our father said, not out of agreement exactly, but out of the long habit of not creating friction. He was not unkind. He was careful in the way people become careful when they've lived inside an arrangement long enough that they can't easily imagine it being different. Aunt Sylvia, my father's sister, 11 years older, retired from a school district position in Inkster, came to family dinners semi-regularly. She had never lived with us. She had her own house, her own money, her own opinions, which she delivered infrequently and precisely, the way someone delivers a tool they know will be used correctly. She had watched my father for decades and understood him in the way people understand a weather system they've sheltered through many times. Not with fondness exactly, but with a kind of clear-eyed familiarity that didn't require discussion. I had moved out once before, at 23, into a shared apartment in Westland with 2 colleagues. That lasted 14 months before the arrangement dissolved for reasons unrelated to my father. When I moved back to Pershing Drive temporarily, it was supposed to be for 3 months. It became 2 years, during which Randall had gradually expanded his commentary on my finances from observation to management, and my accounts, which he did not have access to and which I had been careful to keep separate, had become a recurring subject. Not confrontationally. He raised the topic the way he raised most things he'd decided on, as though he were simply describing something that was already understood, and the conversation was just a formality before it became official. The savings were not an accident. That's the part one want to be clear about, because it would be easy to make them sound like luck, like I happened to accumulate money without particular effort and my father happened to want it. That is not what happened. I had started setting money aside at 22, the month I received my first full paycheck. The contribution wasn't large at first, a fixed amount transferred on the same day every month, automatically before I saw the balance. Over the following years I increased the amount as my income grew, not dramatically but consistently. I declined things I wanted. I took on additional project work when it was available. I worked late on Thursday evenings reviewing secondary client accounts because the extra hours translated directly to the quarterly bonus structure, and the bonus went into the savings the same week it cleared. In the final year before the move date, I had averaged contributions of roughly $847 a month across the 3 accounts, and the total had reached $23,714. I knew the number exactly because I checked it on the first of every month, the way you check a level on a shelf you're building, not anxiously just to confirm the work is holding. What I had contributed to the family on Pershing Drive during those same years was harder to quantify in dollar terms, though I could have done it. I had covered a car insurance lapse when Randall's payment had bounced and the policy was 3 days from cancellation. I had absorbed a portion of 1 month's utilities during a period when Devin was between employment situations. I had bought groceries on a rotating basis for the better part of a year, not formally, just reliably, the kind of contribution that gets absorbed into the household without being named. I had done these things because I lived in the house and they needed doing, not because I was asked to account for them. My father had never asked me to account for them either. What he had done, beginning around the time I started discussing the move openly, was begin to position himself as someone with relevant financial authority over the transition. He mentioned twice that moving out carried costs people underestimated. He said, once in a way that was hard to disagree with because it was framed as concern, that he worried about me being on my own with money I hadn't learned to manage in a real environment. He said this to me, a financial analyst, and did not appear to notice the specific quality of the silence that followed. 3 weeks before the dinner, Devin had said something offhand at breakfast, not to me directly, to Randall while I was in the kitchen, about some form that needed to be signed before the move. A transfer authorization, Devin called it. A safekeeping thing. He had said it casually and Randall had said something back that I didn't catch entirely, and the conversation moved on. Devin had looked at his phone. The kitchen went back to its ordinary morning sounds. I stayed at the counter until my coffee was done. I heard the word safekeeping. That afternoon I called my bank. The house on Pershing Drive smelled the same it always had, something between the particular cleaning product my father used on the kitchen floor and whatever Devin had been cooking earlier in the day. I arrived at 6:43 p.m. on a Sunday. Aunt Sylvia's car was already in the driveway. The table was set for 4. Randall had made a pot roast, which he only did when he wanted the atmosphere to feel substantial. There were candles in the center of the table that I didn't recognize, new ones bought specifically, which meant the occasion mattered to him in a way he wasn't going to name directly. Devin was already seated, scrolling his phone, and he set it down when I came in. Aunt Sylvia was at the far end of the table with a glass of water, watching the room the way she always did at family meals. Not disengaged, just positioned slightly outside whatever was about to happen. I sat in my usual place and unfolded my napkin. Randall came in from the kitchen carrying the pot roast on a platter and set it on the stand at the end of the table. He made a brief comment about traffic on Denton being bad this week. Devin asked about the game on Saturday. I answered a question about the new apartment street parking. The conversation was the kind that happens when everyone at a table knows something else is coming and no one is going to name it first. We ate for 20 minutes before Randall said anything about the move. He did it the way he did most things he had prepared for, by approaching it from a direction that looked like casual conversation. So, he said. 2 weeks out. 2 weeks, I said. Big step, he said. Garden City's not bad. It's a reasonable area. He nodded, the way someone nods when they're building towards something and want you to feel the reasonableness accumulating. I've been thinking, though, about the practicalities. What practicalities? I said. The financial side. He set down his fork. Moving out is expensive. First month, last month, deposits, the unexpected things. You've got savings, but savings go fast when you're establishing yourself. Devin nodded without looking up from his plate. I'm aware, I said. We thought, Randall said, and I noted the we, the way it arrived without a referent, as though Devin's nod constituted a counsel. It might make sense for you to let us hold your savings while you get settled. Just for safekeeping. The room was very quiet. Aunt Sylvia set her fork down with a small sound and looked at the center of the table. Randall reached to the side of his chair and brought up a single sheet of paper, folded down the center with a crease that had been made and remade, the kind of crease that meant it had been carried around for days. He unfolded it and slid it across the table toward me. I looked at it without picking it up. It was an account transfer authorization form. 2 signature lines at the bottom. My name was already typed into the transferring party field. "It's just paperwork," Randall said. "So we can make sure the money is safe while you transition." Something pressed flat behind my sternum, not alarm, not even disbelief, something more like the sensation of watching a sequence complete itself exactly as you had predicted it would, which is its own particular weight. "Safe from what?" I said. "From being spent down too fast. You know how it goes. New place, new expenses, you dip into savings and then they're gone." "You want me to sign over access to my accounts?" I said. "Just for a period," he said. "Until you're stable." "That's not safekeeping," I said. "That's a transfer authorization. Those aren't the same thing." "Celeste," he said, and his voice shifted just slightly, the warmth thinning at the edges, "don't be ungrateful. We're trying to help you." I said nothing. I looked at the form on the table. "I appreciate the concern," I said. Randall tapped the form once with 2 fingers. "Just sign it tonight and we can handle the rest." "I'm not going to sign it tonight," I said. "Why not?" "Because I'd like to think about it," I said. "There's nothing to think about," he said. "It's your family. We're not strangers." "I know," I said. "I'd still like to think about it." The silence after that had a different quality than the silences before it. Randall looked at the form. Devin looked at his plate. Aunt Sylvia picked up her water glass and held it without drinking. I excused myself at 7:22 p.m. I walked to the kitchen. The overhead light was on, the counters clean, the pot roast pan sitting in the sink with water already in it from when Randall had rinsed it. I filled a glass of water from the tap. I set it on the counter. I looked out the window above the sink, the neighbor's backyard, the same fence it had always been, a motion sensor light that clicked on for no apparent reason and then clicked off again. I picked up the glass and drank half of it. I walked back to the hallway. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the wall. The hallway was the same width it had always been, and I had stood in it 1,000 times, and it was not different now. I let my hand rest on the wall for another moment, then I went back to the table and sat down. I reached into my bag and took out my phone. I opened the folder I had organized 11 days earlier, the morning after I had called my bank and spent 40 minutes on the phone and then driven to the branch on Denton Boulevard in person and completed what I needed to complete. The folder had 4 files. I had not looked at them since the day I saved them. I opened the first one. I turned the phone face up on the table and set it flat in the center, between my place and Devin's. The screen showed a bank closure confirmation. My name at the top, an account number ending in 4 digits I recognized, the balance at the time of closure, $0. The date of closure, 11 days prior. Below it, partially visible, the header of a second confirmation for a different account, same date. Randall looked at the screen. He didn't pick up the phone. "What is that?" he said. "Closure confirmations," I said. "All 3 accounts. I closed them 11 days ago and moved the funds." Devin looked up. "You closed your accounts," Randall said. "Yes," I said. "Before the dinner," he said. "Yes," I said. "Why would you?" He stopped. He picked up the form from the center of the table and looked at it, then set it back down. "Celeste, you've taken money that the family—" "It's my money," I said. "I earned it. I saved it. I tracked it every month for 5 years." "That's not the point," he said, and his voice had moved fully past warmth now into something tighter. "The point is that you're moving out of this house and leaving, and you don't think about what that costs the people who—" "You said I was ungrateful," I said. "At this table 10 minutes ago. You said don't be ungrateful." He didn't answer. "I want to tell you what I've contributed to this house," I said, keeping my voice level. "Not to argue about it. Just so we have the same information." I looked at him. "I covered your insurance lapse 2 years ago. I covered part of the utilities for 3 months the year before that. I've bought groceries for this household on a near-weekly basis for the better part of 18 months. I didn't keep a ledger. I didn't ask to be reimbursed." Randall said, That's just what family does. Yes, I said. It is. And this, I looked at the form on the table, is not. Devin said my name quietly. Just my name. He was looking at the form. Aunt Sylvia said, Randall. One word, flat and specific. Randall looked at her. Then back at me. The accounts are closed, I said. The form doesn't transfer anything. There's nothing there to hold. You planned this, he said. The warmth was gone entirely. I heard Devin mention a transfer authorization 3 weeks ago, I said. I made a decision based on what I heard. He picked up the form and set it down again. You don't trust your own family. You slid a transfer authorization across the dinner table, I said. With my name already typed into it. He had nothing to say to that, and the silence that followed was the longest one of the evening. I picked up the phone and turned the screen off and put it back in my bag. You told me I'd never survive out there, I said. I've been surviving in here quietly for 2 years while contributing to this household. I know how to manage money. It's what I do every day. I looked at him directly. What I can't do is sign something that transfers 5 years of my own savings to an account I don't control the week before I move out. That's not ingratitude. That's just arithmetic. I stood up. I looked at Aunt Sylvia, who gave me one small nod. I looked at Devin, who didn't look back. The pot roast was good, I said to my father. Thank you for making it. I picked up my bag and I left. 5 months after the dinner on Pershing Drive, I had been in the apartment on Callaway Street long enough that it felt like mine in the specific way places feel like yours when you've rearranged the furniture at least once and learned which burner runs hot. The light in the mornings was what I remembered from the first showing, east-facing, landing across the kitchen counter by 7:15, gone by 9. I had bought a small table for the window in the main room, and on weekend mornings I sat there with coffee and my laptop and worked through whatever I had brought home from the office. It was an ordinary thing. It had taken 5 years to make it possible. The $23,714 had not been spent down. Some of it had gone to the deposit the first month, the things Randall was right about in the abstract if wrong about in the specific, moving costs money. The remainder sat in a new account, at a different bank in my name only, and I contributed to it on the same schedule I always had. My father called once, 6 weeks after the dinner. He left a voicemail. He said he had been thinking about things and that he hoped I was settling in well and that families go through rough patches, but that he was my father and that door was always open. His voice had the quality of a letter that had been rewritten several times and still didn't say the thing it was actually about. I listened to it in full. I did not call back. Devin texted me twice in those 5 months, once to ask if I had a contact for an insurance broker, once to say happy birthday. I replied to both. We were building, slowly and without discussion, a different kind of relationship than the one we'd had on Pershing Drive. It was smaller and more honest, which I preferred. The version of Devin I was getting to know outside the house on Pershing Drive was more straightforward than the one I'd grown up alongside, less managed, less careful. I keep the closure confirmations in a 2-pocket folder I bought at a drugstore the morning after I made my decision. It's a plain thing, dark blue, hole-punched, the paper inside already slightly soft at the corners from being handled during the process. It sits in the bottom drawer of my desk. I don't need it anymore for any practical purpose. I keep it because the work is in it, every month of setting money aside, the phone calls, the drive to the branch on Denton Boulevard, the decision made before anyone at a dinner table could make it for me. What I know is that the people most likely to tell you you're not capable of managing your own life are often the ones who need you not to be capable, because your capability changes the arrangement. That isn't cruelty exactly. It's just the shape a certain kind of fear takes. Knowing that doesn't dissolve it. But it does mean you can plan around it. If any part of this landed somewhere real for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You know who they are. The folder is in the bottom drawer. The savings are intact. The rent is paid. That's the whole story, and it belongs entirely to me.